This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, our weekend show is obviously a little bit different to the weekdays. Here we are each nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, and then our favourite story. It is a competition, of course, so we are joined every week by an adjudicator, a judge, our very impartial Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Michael.
Adam, can we just address very briefly the elephant in the room, or the not really an elephant. It's much smaller than an elephant.
The hound in the room.
The hound in the room, and it's come to my attention that every time we record the weekend edition, you are not on your own. You are accompanied by a small animal at your feet, Maggie the cavoodle.
Maggie's my companion for these recordings, so I like to keep her close by for support, emotional support when I'm under siege from you two adversaries.
Well, I'm going to post a photo of Maggie sleeping at your feet during this recording on our Instagram page.
Look, she might not look interested, but she is.
You know how dog owners tend to start looking like their dogs?
Should we have a comparison photograph?
Yeah, saying I need a picture of Adam and a picture of Maggie. Well, we'll start with the picture of Maggie, and then next week I'll see if I can raid the archives and find a picture of Adam.
See if you can tell us apart.
But yeah, head to Instagram, Fear and Greed Podcast, and check out Maggie on there. Now, Adam, you got your score sheet ready. You're obviously scoring every category out of 25 and helping us to pick a winner.
I am indeed, and as you know, Michael, the criteria: economic impact, timeliness, storytelling, and of course my last one, pure subjective bias.
Which kind of negates all the others, really, doesn't it?
It can.
Totally.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into it. Biggest story of the week, Sean. Go for it.
Michael, it's getting a bit boring. I'm doing it again, the same story, because it was a massive week for markets because of one speech by the US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. One speech in about 40 minutes, he changed markets totally. The world's most important central banker made it clear that it's time to take the foot off the gas when it comes to interest rate hikes. Now, that'll happen as soon as 2 weeks' time when the Fed next meets. It will raise rates, but maybe by 50 basis points, not the 75 basis points that it's been doing recently. Powell's comments had far-reaching ramifications. Suddenly, riskier assets became more attractive. Bitcoin can't get much more risky than cryptos. It rose. Non-US dollar currencies jumped, including the Aussie dollar. In fact, that went above 68 cents this week. Equity markets soared on the actual day. Wall Street was up 3-4%. The Aussie rose to its highest level in more than 6 months. The Fed and other central banks are only going to slow the pace of rate rises if they think they're doing a good job containing inflation. And recent economic data suggests that just might be the case. Now, in Australia this week, monthly inflation figures for October came out. They were just a bit weaker than expected. Is this week the turning point in the economic cycle? Maybe. Just maybe.
Oh, good. You were just kind of, I don't reckon you had won that until that last sentence when you just kind of brought it home and just slapped a bit of mayo on the story and said, here you go, this'll do it.
Let me say it again. Maggie the dog, is this the week where your pet food will become a little more expensive and you, Adam, will pay out?
Oh, well done. That is just glorious. It's barely even worth me attempting this, but I will anyway, because it's been another big week, a huge week in Parliament. And I know I chose kind of federal politics last week as my biggest story, but it seems like it's the week for us just repeating our choices. Last week, though, it was kind of all about kind of works in progress, really, whereas this week we actually saw a lot of results. And I know, Adam, you criticised me previously for going off too early on things like this. Well, this week it was all happening. Well, some of these have massively significant consequences for business. So obviously the industrial relations legislation would have been the most significant. Out of a week of significant events, this was the most significant because the government secured the support of independent Senator David Pocock for the IR legislation. He was under a huge amount of pressure, really, because everybody was hoping that he would back them. In the end, Senator Pocock was won over by the government's commitment to review the adequacy of support payments annually. The legislation passed the Senate late on Thursday night. There are other parts of the legislation like banning pay secrecy clauses and capping fixed term contracts. There is a lot in this, but where businesses are really going to notice a lot of these changes is in multi-employer bargaining. There are exemptions for businesses with up to 20 staff, but employer groups are warning that the laws are fundamentally flawed and say that this will lead to more strikes and fewer jobs. But that's just part of kind of what happened this week, just to show you how big a week it was in Parliament. The National Anti-Corruption Commission legislation was passed. The Nationals said they won't support an Indigenous voice to Parliament. Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison was censured by Parliament over the secret ministry scandal. Didn't seem too worried about all of that. The government released a report showing we're only on track to hit 40% greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, not 43%. So prepare for more changes on that front to get the job done. It is a huge week and the biggest story this week. Adam, do you agree?
I agree with both of you, actually. It's a dead heat on this one because they're both massive. Markets, Jerome Powell, one speech, and it really did impact the world. And the volume of dollars involved internationally, including our markets here in Australia, was huge. But the sum of the parts of what's been going on in Parliament is a huge story. And talk about a flourish at the end by Parliament, getting all of this done, including the former Prime Minister Scott Morrison's censure, but industrial relations laws in particular, and the greenhouse impact that's going to have to go faster. I was in my mind thinking, is this sleeper or is this big? No, it's all big. So I'm calling dead heat on this one. Well done to both of you.
Well, there we go.
There we go.
I must say, the use of superlatives and flourish is really reaching a new high for both of you.
You're becoming increasingly desperate for the win. All right, most remarkable story. I'm going to go first on this one. And I think what I realized this week, and I think I've said this about 4 times this week on Fear and Greed, is just how nobody really knows what's going on in the property market. Sure, there's plenty of data and we know where we've been, but trying to figure out what the next 12 months or the next 24 months or 36 months holds is like looking into a crystal ball. It's almost impossible. What we do know for sure is that house prices in capital cities across Australia fell by 1% last month, having now experienced the steepest fall in 4 decades, now down around 7%. The pace is slowing according to CoreLogic, but that's still 8 months in a row of drops. So that's remarkable. The other part, though, the other remarkable part is kind of what comes next. And you've got AMP Chief Economist Shane Oliver saying that he expects house prices to fall kind of 15 to 20% peak to trough, with the bottom in the second half of next year. ANZ kind of agrees, peak to trough 18%, because people don't have the capacity to borrow as much as they did before. But then you've got the respected group SQM Research suggesting prices will rise between 3 and 7% next year, even if the cash rate goes up by another 1%. So who's right? I mean, who knows? We've seen, obviously, people making predictions before, like Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe, who this week apologised for saying rates wouldn't rise until 2024 at the earliest, in particular apologising to anybody who took out loans on the basis of what he said. Unprecedented and utterly remarkable. Sean.
Are you saying that economists not knowing what they're talking about is remarkable?
That's a very good point. I'm not going to...
You know, Adam trained as an economist.
I'm actually just going to remain completely silent here and just allow you to kind of continue egging this one for me.
Okay, now the most remarkable story for mine came from the World Cup. It's the biggest thing going on outside financial markets and Parliament around the world at the moment. In fact, it probably is the biggest thing going on around the world at the moment. Go you Socceroos, go Japan. Good to see the Asian teams doing well. This week, a top official involved in the tournament said the number of worker deaths building the incredible stadiums that we're seeing on TV was somewhere between 400 and 500. Between 400 and 500 people have died. It's much higher than previous estimates of around 40 deaths, which in itself was pretty horrific. Qatar has been a controversial pick as host of this World Cup. Remember, Australia bid for it and missed out. Qatar got the gig. The football has been great, but not the politics. Migrant labour built more than $200 billion worth of stadiums, metro lines, and new infrastructure for this incredible tournament. Up to 500 people died doing it. Remarkable. Adam.
So these are both excellent and remarkable. I'm going to give this one to Michael because of its economic impact on Australia, because the property market is so bound to so many of us across the country. So its impact is huge. And I think everyone is watching the smallest move in interest rates, where they're probably going to go up, but will they slow? And I think that's the hopeful news we got this week. Qatar, I mean, even FIFA investigated itself and said it was fine in awarding Qatar the World Cup, which, self-investigation, you got to query that. The whole thing in terms of human rights in Qatar, including the treatment of construction workers and that many deaths, that is stunning. But Michael, just on economic impact scale, I think you get this one this week.
Shout out to you, Adam, for using the phrase self-investigation.
Thank you. We are definitely going to leave that one alone.
Yep.
And thank you, Adam, for awarding that, considering I didn't actually talk much about the economic impact. And I realised just after I'd finished, I'm like, oh no, I forgot to mention the economic impact. And I was going to add it in and I didn't need to. It's like you read my mind.
He's an excellent judge, no doubt about it.
Oh, I think he's fantastic right now. He's the best judge I've ever seen. All right, we'll be back in a moment with the sleeper story of the week. All right, we're looking for the sleeper story of the week. So this is a story that's maybe not getting the attention that it deserves or is going to become a bigger story further down the track. So in a way, we're actually trying to kind of figure out what is going to become news. And in the past, I have been kind of marked down by our eminent judge because I talk about things that haven't actually happened yet, but it's almost required for this category. Anyway, look, clearly I'm trying to set myself up here. So Sean, you go first.
Okay, for mine, the news this week that Meta Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg has had a crack at the Apple App Store. Mr. Zuckerberg said it was problematic for one company to be able to control what app experiences end up on a device, adding that the vast majority of profits in the mobile ecosystem go toward Apple. Now, of course, revenue at Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, has taken a hit since Apple tightened its privacy policies to restrict how users can be tracked and targeted with advertising. Zuckerberg joins Elon Musk and a host of non-tech companies, including the banks in Australia, complaining about the market power of Apple and the ability that Apple has to act as a gateway. Now, I must say, it's somewhat ironic that Zuckerberg is complaining about monopoly power, the man who invented Facebook. Anyway, also this week, Elon Musk said Apple had pretty much dropped advertising from his platform, Twitter. He's threatened to take Twitter out of the App Store. Won't happen. App Store far too important to get people onto Twitter. Why is it a sleeper? Because so far, the tech giants have pretty much stayed away from each other. They compete, but they don't complain about each other. And that's been the case for decades now. But Apple is such a dominant force, particularly in the United States, that the other big tech companies are now complaining. Tech wars have started. It's not just legacy companies like the banks and retailers complaining about the tech giants. It's actually the tech giants fighting with each other. And that is a genuine shift, which I think will play out over the years to come. Hence, a great sleeper story. Michael.
Adam, do you remember when Tim Burrows was judging the weekend edition and he accused us of taking a big story and then trying to reverse engineer it and shoehorn it into the sleeper category? I feel like that's what we've just seen happen. I mean, I don't want to kind of cast aspersions.
No. And you are staying independent from the judging process, of course, Michael.
But please keep that in mind when making your decision. Look, I reserved my story this week live during one of our shows, which means that even if I wanted to back out, I couldn't. So now I am all in on climate change and the banks. This week, we saw the banking regulator, APRA, modelling the impact of climate change on the big lenders. And overall, I said, yeah, they're in pretty good shape. And an increase in loan losses because of climate change would be unlikely to cause severe stress to the banks. But what I thought was really interesting and where this becomes a sleeper story, particularly as it kind of relates to ordinary people in Australia is the state-by-state modelling, which is not good news for mortgage holders because APRA found that mortgage loss rates, for example, in Queensland, which is particularly susceptible to climate change through higher temperatures, etc., and extreme weather, could rise by more than 35% by 2045. And that's obviously significantly more than the 10% increase in New South Wales, 6% in Victoria. So what does that actually then mean? It means that the banks would likely have to start kind of looking at and treating differently certain geographies within Australia and potentially then start charging customers more depending on the level of risk. So this is a pretty big change. If this is kind of the way it's going to go over the next few years as banks start to take into account the risk of climate change and putting that into their kind of forward projections and their modelling, this could be a very, very big story. But it is a sleeper because of the definition that I gave earlier. Adam.
High quality battle, gentlemen. Well done. I can't split this one, and they're for completely different reasons, but both great sleepers. So with the tech wars, and they're turning on each other, these huge, wealthy individuals turning on each other. I think that is just so interesting. And then in terms of climate change and where this is going to impact people's mortgages, and so many in different states. And we're seeing this amongst the effects of La Nina, particularly along the eastern seaboard, floods and so much rains right now. And then we're considering really the front line of those effects of climate change. So I can't split them. Both very high quality sleeper stories. Well done.
Okay, so what are we now? We each have one.
I think we're 1.5-1. Which is odd when we've already had 3 stories, but go on.
We're kind of breaking new ground here. All right. Yeah. Favorite story of the week. I'll go first on this one, Sean. I have gone international for my favorite story of the week. And this one comes out of Japan, where COVID restrictions have been eased further. And now kids at school will be able to talk to each other again at lunch, because for almost 3 years now, they've had guidelines in place requiring students to eat alone at their desks, not to converse with each other. And so that's now changed. And that's pretty significant, obviously, if you are a Japanese child. The guidelines have been issued that are designed to help get kids talking again, which is actually kind of sad when you think about the fact that they actually need to provide that guidance to kids to help them do something that should come pretty naturally. So obviously, these restrictions have had a pretty significant effect on the way kids are just operating and developing. But 2 things to take away from this story. Japan has been pretty successful at limiting COVID deaths, but to do it, they've had to introduce some pretty tough measures. And obviously, we've got tourists only just being allowed back into the country. The second takeaway from this story is, am I the only one who prefers to eat lunch in silence? And breakfast and dinner. Like, my ideal scenario here is sitting there on my own with a book. I can be with other people, but as long as they're reading as well. Nobody talking, the dream. Are you with me?
Did you have many friends at school, Michael?
I'm sorry, I think I just lost you there.
This could be a caution for personal attacks here.
Oh, no, hold on. He left himself open. Come on. He was a nerdy kid in the corner with his book, eating his Vegemite sandwich every day of the week.
Other people can be there. They just can't talk to me.
That's right.
That's what I said.
Read books too.
We can all sit in silence. We can sit together and read. There's a certain companionship in silence, Sean.
Hey, Michael, did you enjoy that art lesson we just had? Just the raise of the eyebrows, the absolute disdain look on the face. Back to the book.
Oh, you were there. You saw me. That is exactly me. So anyway, all right, I'll take it that neither of you are with me, but that was my favourite story of the week.
Fair enough. Look, my favourite story this week was that we found out that climate change, we know climate change is causing thawing of ancient permafrost, but the part I like this week is that it's revived 24 extinct viruses, including one from a lake that froze more than 48,000 years ago. Researchers examined ancient samples collected from permafrost in the Siberia region of Russia. Now, they revived and characterized 13 new pathogens. They're calling them zombie viruses. Is that not the best name? Anyway, they found that they actually remained infectious. So this thing's been there, this pathogen's been there for 48,000 years. It is still infectious. Incredible, isn't it? The chance that this virus will infect animals or humans is probably pretty low. It's problematic, but it could happen. I mean, if their work's extrapolated, the danger is real. I just think that's incredible that something can be trapped in the permafrost for that long and then suddenly emerge. How do you kill these viruses? Maybe you never do. Amazing. Oh, Adam, make something out of this, would you?
Okay, so both excellent stories. I'm going to think of the children on this one, and Michael wins. I can't believe it. These poor Japanese school children haven't been able to talk to each other for the last 2.5, nearly 3 years. It's incredible. It just makes me think back to how tough lockdowns were on all of us. But this week we've seen in China the protests about COVID zero, and this story about Japanese COVID restrictions being eased. To me, I thank God for those kids at long last. Sean, it's a ripper of a story on the permafrost thawing and those old viruses after 48,000 years coming back. But Michael just wins on this one.
Fair enough. 3-1. Well done, Michael.
May we inquire to the points? Just because it would have been such a close one because we had 2 ties.
2 ties. So high quality battle, gentlemen. Sean, 92 points. Michael, 94 points.
Oh, that's probably our highest scoring round ever.
But I am going to complain here. Fair and square, I lost. But that means that you scored 2 dead heats and then 1 point difference for the other 2.
That's right.
Adam, you need a bit more mongrel in you. You're too nice a bloke. That's all I'm going to say.
More savagery.
Hand the score sheet over to Maggie. Let her
have a crack at it.
Not implying that Maggie is in fact a mongrel, because I don't want to speculate about her breeding.
Is there a dog that's not a mongrel?
Maggie's a cavoodle, so she is.
Yeah.
So hang on, isn't a mongrel kind of
mixed breed?
Mixed breed?
Yeah. So there's very few pure breeds, like a cavoodle, which is where Adam lives. Everyone has to have a cavoodle tottering around the streets early in the morning, leaving their little messages for everyone else.
Well, I very much like Maggie because she is a very very cute dog.
Michael, you've won.
But there's a but.
Okay.
I'm wary of anything with an oodle in it because they don't have good paw definition, and I don't trust a dog whose paws you can't really kind of
Paw definition.
Paw definition.
Yeah.
POOR?
PAW definition. Like when you see them walking along, you're like, oh, you've got paws somewhere within all of that fur. No?
True.
Okay.
No, I know what you mean. No, I do get where you're going there. I'm with
give
you.
me a good kind of cattle dog or something. Like you can see that.
No. I got bitten by a cattle dog 2 weeks ago. Cattle dogs are out.
In Central Park.
That is still so. Anyway, look, if you want to see the picture of Maggie, head to our Instagram page, which is Fear and Greed Podcast, and let us know whether you think that we should ask Maggie to judge next week.
Yes, points for poor definition.
Yeah, yes. Oh, it should be fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Congratulations, Michael.
Oh, thank you. Now, make sure you're following the podcast. And as I mentioned, join us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Don't forget to check out as well our new podcast, How Do They Afford That?, featuring Canna Campbell, the founder of Sugar Mama TV. The episode this week is all about bill shock and basically how to deal with a larger than expected power bill, for example. It is a good one. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a great weekend.